Did I request thee, maker, from my clay to mould me man? Did I solicit thee from darkness to promote me? This is one of my favourite books of all time. A trend in this series so far. I just prefer to do ones currently that I'm a fan of. Mary Shelley, Frankenstein. I read it in 2017, so possibly nearly 5 years ago, I think. This is definitely one of my favourite books of all time. It used to be my favourite. That's probably superseded by Summer Lane and the King of Elfland's Daughter and all that. I'm just going to read, just to start off, I'm just going to read the back of this book. Obsessed with creating life itself, Victor Frankenstein plunders graveyards for the material to fashion a new being, which he shocks into life with electricity. But his blotched creature, rejected by Frankenstein and denied human companionship, sets out to destroy his maker and all that he holds dear. Mary Shelley's chilling Gothic tale was conceived when she was only 18, living with her lover Percy Shelley near Byron's villa on Lake Geneva. It would become the world's most famous work of horror fiction, and remains a devastating exploration of the limits of human creativity. That's one of the things about this book, the limits of human creativity, and the subtitle for this book is The Modern Prometheus. If you're familiar with Greek mythology, you'll know that Prometheus was a titan, the brother of Epimetheus, who stole fire from the gods, from Zeus, to give to man, to support man. And then Zeus found this out and chained him to the crag on the Caucasus, where an eagle continually pecks out Prometheus' liver, and it regenerates and all that, and it's a continual torment for blaspheming against the gods for his pride. It's really a cautionary tale in this book. It's a very apt subtitle. So the book was written in 1818, or it was written in 1821, depending on the edition. I'm actually not quite sure what edition this is. It's probably the second edition. There's a good introduction in this Penguin Classics version. So the background to this episode, this review, I think highlights the difference in terms of aesthetics and perception of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster and the work as a whole. And we will get onto that at the end. I have some quite strong views on how terribly this book is portrayed. It actually makes me quite angry sometimes. The one that I've chosen, there's a lot of good paintings for classical sort of perceptions for Frankenstein. This is quite a good one, as it shows how I view the creature to look, and Victor as well. Sort of, you can see there in the top right hand corner, he's coming to terms with his own being. The creature is coming to terms with his own being in the forest. It's quite a feral look to it, and there you can also see his confrontations with Victor as well. But just to backtrack a little bit, I'm not going to go into too much depth on this, because this is such a famous work, such an old and famous book, that people will know this already. But essentially, this story, its genesis, it came about by with a sort of story competition very early on. Shelley and Byron's and Shelley and Byron's and their career essentially, and I think there was Polidori as well. They stayed in an old villa, I believe, and they challenged each other to create different horror stories. I'm not entirely sure if it was all horror stories, but essentially Mary Shelley went away and created this work, the first edition of it, in a night or so, or a couple of nights, very quick. She was also, as you read on the back, she was very young as well at the time, which still puzzles me because the language in this is phenomenal. 18 years old apparently. So this work came about just almost on the spur of the moment, really. I think there was also some confusion as to whether Percy helped create this as well. I'm not sure what to think really. It's considered a Gothic novel. It's considered a romantic novel, romantic with a capital R, of course, the Romantic movement of the 19th century, and a little bit earlier. It's also interestingly considered one of the first science fiction novels of all time as well. It has an interesting blend of nature and science and technology, which definitely the book feels like it has, for a short book, it contains a lot of themes and a lot of ideas and concepts. So we've talked about Prometheus, the main sort of overarching idea of the cautionary tale, the man who creates, the man who facilitates a new order, a new era, who comes and changes the way of things. That is exactly what Frankenstein does. Victor Frankenstein, the scientist, the mad scientist, as people like to think of him, who creates the creature. And obviously the whole thing about this creature here, or the creature in the background to this video, people think that Victor or Frankenstein is the monster, but of course it's a little bit overplayed now. But I'm pretty sure everyone should know that the creature is not Frankenstein. So the novel is written in epistolary format. Before I read this, I had no idea that it was written in epistolary format. That's a diary format, or a collected account. It can be various things. I believe Jekyll and Hyde is epistolary format as well, or Dracula as well. So various, doesn't have to be like a diary. It could be snippets of newspapers and other accounts, fragments of journals. And actually, this book actually was quite inspirational for one of my own stories that I wrote. Quite a dark story about a man that journeys into a dark valley. I'm not quite sure if I agree with it or not. I think it's a little bit too layered. It's a little bit sort of like Inception, really. It's so layered that it becomes unbelievable. This, for example, you'll have a character that is recalling events that were recalled by recalled by someone else, and the dialogue is so specific, and it's so specific that it doesn't seem like it could possibly be remembered. Obviously, a lot of books are like that sometimes, but it just feels, in this book, it feels a little bit too much. But again, we are getting ahead of ourselves. The epistolary format comes about because there's a captain who's journeying, Captain Walton, who has his own plans. He's very much in the he has the mindset at the start of the book of Victor Frankenstein, the scientist who we will talk about later on. Walton, he's writing to his sister Margaret about his plans for the future, his need to become famous, his need to explore the Arctic. He's exploring this dangerous region to make a name for himself, to explore and unlock new things, to unlock new knowledge, and that has parallels with both Victor and Prometheus. So that it's like a sort of through line throughout the book, where this the need to acquire knowledge and attain something more, and to make a name for oneself, definitely that's definitely a theme of the book that's very strong. So Walton eventually meets Frankenstein, Victor Frankenstein, in the north. Something I'm struggling with this review is that I don't want to give too many details in terms of the plot, in terms of spoilers. But we know that at the very start of the book, he meets a man who later we find out later that he is Frankenstein. And he has things to say to Walton regarding his own path in life, and whether what he did was correct, whether the creation of the creature was the right thing to do, and whether Walton should be also exploring and trying to unlock new things and trying to disturb the order of things. In a way, this book is actually quite, it's very conservative, which I'm not entirely sure if I agree with or not, probably half and half. It's definitely, I would have probably once said that Prometheus, his search for knowledge and his liberation of man and taking fire from the gods to give to man was a good thing, but I'm not too sure actually. It's a bigger idea than I could possibly challenge, really. And smarter minds than me or anyone else have tackled with it. So the frame story is Walton. The frame story comes about from Walton's discovery of this person on a ship in the Arctic, and this person, Victor, tells him his story, and that's the frame story. That's how we get into the book proper. So we learn of Frankenstein's early childhood. He's a very inquisitive person. He studies. He leaves Italy to go to the University of Ingolstadt in Switzerland, I believe. So he meets a man called Henry Clerval, and he's just I guess he's just a regular student like everyone else, except he's very obsessive. He becomes to be very obsessive. He begins to dabble in the occult, and actually, and he's also quite interested in alchemy as well. And one of the things about this book is that a lot of the ideas in it were shared by Mary Shelley and the people of Mary Shelley's time. They were interested in things like galvanism and alchemy, and so was Victor in this book as well. So was all of the things, the subtitle, the background to the story, galvanism, the occult, alchemy, and all that. It all sort of interrelates quite strongly in this book. There's a lot of parallels, is what I'm trying to say, with things in real life and literary themes and ideas. Just work through this book. So Victor, there's no spoilers to say, of course, that Victor creates his monster, his creature, and essentially a flight ensues. I won't go into too much detail, but there is murder in this book, there's illness, there's death, there's struggles with identity. The book, for me though, does not shine with the characters of Victor Frankenstein, with Henry Clerval, with Justine Moritz, with I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in this book. One of the things that I was actually going to plan to talk about later on was just how much is included in this short work. It's really not a big book. I believe it's only 240 pages or so, maybe even less. There's a lot of travel in this book, actually, a lot more than I originally remembered. We go to Ireland, we go to Scotland, we go to the Arctic, we go to obviously we have Italy and Switzerland and all sorts. There's a lot of aspects to the book that I didn't necessarily enjoy as much as the personal account of Frankenstein's monster, the creature. At the time I did enjoy it, but unfortunately it sort of faded for me. It has been nearly half a decade. So yes, that unfortunately that didn't really stick in my mind as much as it probably should have, but I can't really fault it for what it is. I just feel like my image of the book is the creature, and I think that's probably what it should be anyway. The novelty comes from the creature's perspective. I don't think anyone was really praising this book for its the side stories with Justine and Elizabeth and the marriage and all that sort of thing. Might be some people's preference, but for me it was definitely the creature and his story. And we will get on to the creature now, actually. We meet the creature again sometime later in the mountains, in a very stirring mountain scene, very romantic scene, romantic with a capital R. And we eventually learn what happened to the creature, because at the start of this book, really it's very much from Victor's perspective and from Walton's perspective before that, and we don't actually get to learn what happens to the creature, and I think that's kind of a fault with the book. although in some respects it does make it quite exciting, because I remember when we eventually got back to the creature, I definitely felt quite excited about the confrontation between Victor. So we eventually, just like with Walton relaying the story of Victor, we eventually get Victor relaying the story, I believe, of the creature. So there's a kind of a nested epistolary sort of format to the book, and this is where the book really shines for me. The account of the creature is phenomenal. Not to give too many spoilers, but he comes gradually to experience himself to. He really is he's a complete blank slate, really, like a tabula rasa, really. He awakens in darkness, and I've just written bullet points. I've written darkness, fire, language, birds, wonder, solitude. Where the book really shines for me is how Frankenstein's creature, I nearly said Frankenstein there, how Frankenstein's creature, how the monster comes to know himself, and how he comes to understand books and literature and language and science, and also his persecution by the villagers that he meets as well. And probably my absolutely favourite episode in Frankenstein is his observation of a family, a very kind family, Agatha, Felix, and Safi. Actually, I can't quite remember the elder's name, the father's name, but yes, essentially there's a family who acts as a sort of model for the monster. So he's observing this family, and they act as a sort of model for Frankenstein's creature. He listens to them play music and talk about love and the conflicts of their world, and literature. He's exposed to so much literature through this family. And I will admit I just teared up at a scene where he finally confronts the family. It doesn't go too well for him. It really is one of my favourite probably moments in fiction, actually. So Frankenstein's creature comes to know himself through his exploration of nature and his confrontation with this family. But he's also heavily persecuted as well, and he runs from people that just don't understand him at all. He's done absolutely nothing wrong. That's the thing about this book, that and in the modern perception as well, he did very little wrong, actually. There are some actions that he does in the book, some quite serious actions that he does in the book. Obviously, of course, you could say are wrong, but I would also argue that it wasn't his fault that he committed those actions, essentially, trying to skirt around spoilers. So once we learn of the creature's life and how he develops from essentially a blank slate into a very passionate and learned soul who is persecuted by others simply because they don't understand him, he essentially asks Victor to create someone for himself as a companion, and he will sort of watch from the shadows as Victor accomplishes this. It's sort of like a threat, really. It's a forceful encounter where the creature wants Victor to create again. Sort of like a very tense thing where Victor fears and loathes what he's created, but in order to placate the creature, he says, "I'll create something for you, a companion for you, so you'll go away." But then he also doubts that as well. He thinks that he'll just create more strife in the world because, of course, the creature has committed some crimes as well. So yes, there's a lot of travel in this book. It's not a highlight of the book for me. for example, the episode in Ireland with Henry, but it all serves to bring the characters, to bring Victor really, and the creature to the north, and that's where the sort of the climax occurs. And of course, I won't go into spoilers there. So I'd like now to read some excerpts, and they're possibly my favourite. Again, possibly my favourite passages in fiction. Some of these are just stunning. Of course, some people might not like the style, but for me, the sense of weight that this more archaic language gives is just incredible. So, again, sit back and relax and enjoy these excerpts from Frankenstein, the Modern Prometheus. This one relates to the creature's exploration of nature and his first encounter with birdsong, which for me really encapsulates the sort of the romantic aspect of the book, and the sort of the wonder of small things. I was delighted when I first discovered that a pleasant sound, which often saluted my ears, proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals who had often intercepted the light from my eyes. So it's a very, because he's a blank slate, he's like a tabula rasa. He views nature in a more sort of majestic and wondrous sense than we would perhaps. We just see birds, and of course birds are beautiful, but the language there, which often saluted my ears, proceeded from the throats of the little winged animals. This gives them a sense of wonder, I suppose. Some of the more stirring passages now, some of the more conflicting and tense passages. All men hate the wretched. How then must I be hated who am miserable beyond all living things? Yet you, my Creator, detest and spurn me, thy creature to whom thou art bound by ties only dissoluble by the annihilation of one of us. You purpose to kill me. How dare you sport thus with life? Do your duty towards me, and I will do mine towards you and the rest of mankind. If you will comply with my conditions, I will leave them and you at peace. But if you refuse, I will glut the maw of death until it be satiated with the blood of your remaining friends. I am thy creature, and I will be even mild and docile to my natural lord and king, if thou wilt also perform thy part, the which thou owest me. O Frankenstein, be not equitable to every other, and trample upon me alone, to whom thy justice and even thy clemency and affection is most due. Remember that I am thy creature. I ought to be thy Adam, but I am rather the fallen angel. Absolutely incredible language. Really absolutely incredible. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings. If the multitude of mankind knew of my existence, they would do as you do, and arm themselves for my destruction. These bleak skies I hail, for they are kinder to me than your fellow beings. It's a very romantic book, again romantic with a capital R. Yes, I will wait till we get to the modern perceptions of the book before we contrast certain emotions and textures and feelings and aesthetics of the book that I love the book for, compared with the modern perception. The cold stars shone in mockery, and the bare trees waved their branches above me. Now and then the sweet voice of a bird burst forth from its universal stillness. All save I were at rest or in enjoyment. I, like the arch-fiend, bore a hell within me, and finding myself unsympathized with, wished to tear up the trees, spread havoc and destruction around me. If you look at any perception of Frankenstein, on Google Images for example, you'll get a green-haired, block-headed man with bolts in his neck. It's an absolute travesty. I've actually written about this in various places. The idea that Frankenstein is a mute idiot goes completely against how he is in the book. And it's extremely ironic in the truest sense of the word, because that's what people hate him in the book for. They think that he's just an idiot, except he's extremely learned, and he's read many books and he's learned many things. There's actually a passage which I haven't been able to find actually, about his reading, I think it's Volney's Ruins of Empires, and he reads Paradise Lost and all the classic works of fiction and non-fiction, and just contrast that with the popular conception of Frankenstein and the popular films that came out in, I believe it was in the 50s and all that. I'm not sure where they went wrong really. There are some good conceptions of Frankenstein and Frankenstein's creature, but they're very few and far between. I've written this down, instead of a romantic, deeply stirring book about creative genius, the wonder and harshness of nature, weather, and coming into the world like a newborn, and experiencing the wonder of nature, the inner life and the turmoil of the hated creature, the visceral emotional quality of the book as a whole. Instead we get a groaning, green-haired, block-headed man. And also the Bride of Frankenstein as well completely goes against the atmosphere of the book as well. It's just camp nonsense really. Anyway, that we're not talking about the modern perception. We shouldn't be talking about that. We should be talking about the actual book itself. Read Frankenstein if you want incredible language, just like with most books that I've reviewed. If you want a deeply touching book about solitude and acceptance and the need and the want to make a name for oneself, again the beauty of nature, even the perils of science, of some scientific pursuits, and really, I guess it's just pride and the downfall of man, really. So anyway, could go on about this book for a long time, but that was Frankenstein or the Modern Prometheus by Mary Shelley. Thanks for watching.